So welcome again to this follow-up webinar with John and Richard, who have been working on the Whiteborough Solar Park project. I'm Ben. I'm a senior investment manager at Ethex. I'm joined by my colleague Jerome, who is a senior development manager at Ethex, and we will be talking to John and Richard to get an update on this Whiteborough Solar Park site. As I mentioned, this Cup Club is recorded. It will probably last around 30 to 45 minutes. If you've got any questions, please save them to the end. You're welcome to put them in the chat, and towards the end of the webinar, Jerome and I will be asking your questions to John and Richard. So please feel free to ask them in the chat box. A little bit about Whiteborough Solar Park. Actually, probably it's probably a better idea if John and Rich, you introduce Whiteborough Solar Park. So, without further ado, would you like to reintroduce yourselves to our investors and maybe give a short background on Whiteborough Solar Park? I think that'd be a
Sure,
great place to
sure,
start.
sure. Thanks, Ben. So I'm John Hallé. I'm Chief Exec of Big Solar Co-op. Um, and Richard, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm Richard Lane. I'm a community energy consultant with Sharenergy, which is kind of a sister organisation of the Big Solar Co-op. It's sort of supported it as it's established itself, and now I'm very much involved, hands-on in the project management and the build at Whiteborough.
So yeah, thanks, Rich. I mean, I think it's worth giving a little bit of background to how we ended up doing the Whiteborough project. So Big Solar Co-op is first Big Solar Co-op. So Big Solar Co-op is a UK-wide solar cooperative. We formed it around the end of a feed-in tariffs, where we realised, I think, that a lot of smaller solar cooperatives, which was the model at the time, would struggle. And yeah, would it be possible to keep the things that were great about the small cooperatives, a wide ownership, a not-for-profit structure, a lot of opportunities for volunteers, and for people to come and build things within their own communities. But could we try and house that in a wider structure which had economies of scale, economies of risk, which was UK wide, and which would enable people to get on and get solar built, even if perhaps they didn't set up a group in their neighborhood, and to reach parts of the country that didn't have much in the way of community energy activity going on. I think we've been relatively successful with that so far, and we're on a real growth curve. And most of everything we've done so far has been rooftop solar. That's been our main focus. I think I've always been interested in whether we can take that same approach and apply it to ground mount solar, because there's a real gap out there. If you look at government statistics for solar that's being built in the UK, there's quite a lot of domestic scale and small scale solar. There's quite a lot of really enormous scale solar, but in the middle, a place where almost everybody agrees we need to build more solar, which is, large rooftops and kind of small fields, not much has been happening. And so we really set up to try and fill that gap. Um, I have always had some reservations about ground mount solar in some contexts. There's obviously a concern about land take and whether it competes with farmland. Um, and so when we found the Whiteborough site, it was a real win for us, because it's on the what was formerly a coal mine, and a coal mine that was filled in and is now, I mean, I think, Rich, it's fair to say it's very low grade. It's grade 4 agricultural land.
Yeah.
Um, and so there was an opportunity to use a site that was, not very valuable for agriculture, and where we could do a little bit more. Actually, we could go and enhance biodiversity on the site considerably from where we're at. Um, uh, and then because we like our projects to be more complicated, we also decided to try and make this an extremely low carbon solar park. So we have opted to build half of it with second life solar. So solar that's being decommissioned somewhere else that we can reuse on our sites, which means that the embodied carbon is very low. We don't really have figures to compare with others, but it would be one of the lowest ever built in the UK, we think.
Thanks, John. That's really useful background. So, as I've mentioned previously, just now, it's been extraordinarily successful, this raise. You've over raised, so we're nearing the maximum, the 1.8 million mark. Could you just tell us the reasons for wanting to reach this maximum target, which is very impressive?
Yeah, I mean it's simple really, but we originally thought, well, let's do a raise in the summer for 800,000 and then come back later on for another raise in the winter, broadly speaking, for a million. I mean, what's happened is we've had a really great response to the bond offer, and so the logic has been, well, let's just try and get it all raised now. And we're getting quite close to that target. So it's really been a remarkable response. So we don't know yet because we haven't done a lot of chatting to all the people who've applied and for bonds, what it is that's got people's interest. I mean, clearly there's the ISA wrapper, which makes it appealing from a sort of financial point of view. But I think probably the wider story and what we're trying to achieve with Whiteborough has struck a chord with people as well.
I think that's right. I think it's an incredibly strong narrative impact narrative that you have with this, John and Rich, and it's really inspiring to see how motivated our investors are with this project. So that's a really good answer. Thank you, John. So, Rich, maybe a question for you. So, you've already started to draw down some of this investment, and you have some big news for Thursday. Do you want to give us a sneak peek into what's happening Thursday?
Yes, I mean it's not. I mean it's just part of the process of building a solar farm, really. But it is exciting to see things happening. We have broken ground on the sites. We have started work upgrading the access track. There's all the very kind of mundane stuff that isn't very whizzy, not the high tech end of it. It's really just shoveling around the mud, piling in the stones, doing the very basics like finding somewhere to park your welfare trucks where people can go and have their sandwiches. At lunchtime, there's getting a supply of fresh water to the site, all this kind of thing. We've also done some of the ecological works as well, which is nice. As John's mentioned, we really want to improve the situation there. So we've done the kind of the initial kind of harrowing, opening up some of the bare soil and seeding with some wildflower mix to get that in, and it'll be well trodden in, I should imagine, over the next few weeks. And then on the Thursday we're back onto site for a big what's called marking out. I mean, this is a sort of a standard part of any kind of construction project where you have a surveyor go around with high accuracy GPS and basically just draw out and mark out with flags all the locations that will show us, where our fence line's going, where where the track's getting up to, where the transformer's sitting, all that kind of stuff. So it's a standard part of a construction project, but this really means that we can, get everyone to work on their various bits now. From this point on, we can actually get the people then to pile, and that's where you're going to pile and knock the rods into the ground that the panels are going to sit on, and so on. So yeah, it's a real turning point where we're starting to, well, I would say cook on gas, but that's entirely inappropriate given the decarbonisation aims. But I understand what I mean. Cook on induction.
Well done, Rich. That's great. Thank you. So it's great that work is starting on site. It's really it's good to know how quickly we're turning around this raise and having an impact almost immediately. So that's very impressive. Could you possibly give us the timeline now and the projected timescale for the build out? I think that would be really useful for our investors.
You want to say that, John? Or...
Yeah, carry on.
Okay, all right. Yeah, no. So as I say, the civils are going to kick off week after next in earnest, and then we are starting to deliver things to site. First up is the security. We're trying to get the perimeter up. So October and November are going to be 2 months of very intense work. We have the grid connection we're expecting to be built out. We've got quite a long track down the road to the point of connection. So it's all going to be happening kind of in parallel. We have different contractors doing things at the same time, and we're hoping basically our target is that we want to be installed, have everything in place. I think it's next. Is it February? I think is our target for energizing at the end of February, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what we're working to at the minute. It's the reason um, it's interesting with a project like this. Actually, the longest lead time item is the transformer.
Mm.
So, but you can't, frustrating, you can't put in orders for transformers until you're 100% sure that your electrical design is precisely right. And that in turn is heavily related to your mounting structures. So the interrelations of things are complicated. I mean, I think there's sort of 7 teams involved in this. So there's a grid team that are digging up the road. There's a high voltage team that are getting, as it were, the high voltage cables from near the road to the field. There's a civil works team that are doing the fencing and roads. There's a CCTV team. There's a mountings team. There's an electrical installation. There's a mechanical installation team. There's an electrical installation team. I've probably forgotten somebody.
Well, yeah,
And all these have to work in glorious
Around.
harmony.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a very complex operation. So of course it's going to take a little while. It's not as you said, John, at the beginning. It's not just rooftop you're doing anymore. You're looking at solar farms, which are a different level of complication. So thank you for sharing that. That's really useful. So touching up on your last point, really, it might be useful for our investors to know or just be aware of what potential problems you foresee or issues that you've thought about and are looking to mitigate. Could you touch upon that briefly?
Yeah, I mean, I think, at this stage when we've had an awful lot of minor and sometimes major setbacks
Mm.
over the project period that go way back to when we were first acquiring the site. There's a lot before you even start. Um, and we've had, I mean, one of the challenges with this site is that it's pretty much, as far as we can tell, it's the first time people have used second life solar at scale. And so we had to do quite a lot of learning there. Early on in the project, people were offering us quite appealing loads of second life solar panels. I mean, 250 kilowatt here, is loads of panels, 1,000 panels, 1,000 free good quality panels. And we became aware that actually you have to be quite careful where you get your panels from. You have to be careful how they've been taken down. Were they working before they were taken down? To what extent can you test them? Where do you want to test them? Do you test them where they are currently working? Do you test them in transit? Do you test them before you put them in? And there are some types of testing that are just, financially unviable. So we've had to juggle about a little bit. And of course, when the solar panels become available as well, they become available when somebody's decommissioning. And guess what? Just as our timescales change, theirs do too. So we're currently in the middle of rejigging yet again the phases of a project to make sure that we do everything in the right order. And that's kind of the most challenging part. Um, I guess another challenging aspect would be that a lot of the people who would have been installing this size of solar park in the past have now moved on to installing much, much larger ones. And so in the renewables industry, you're always dealing with people who, some people who are sort of stepping down from enormous scale projects and are used to that, and some people who are stepping up from slightly smaller projects and making sure that everybody understands what's relevant to this kind of scale. So there are some, everyday risks in that. But I think now that we're building, a lot of that has been dealt with. We'll probably find something underground. You always find a weird rocky bit or, something like that. But
That's
yes,
great, John.
we're well
That's
underway. I did
Thank
want to
you.
mention
That's
one thing which I didn't mention in
mm,
the intro, which was another focus of Big Solar Co-op is ethical sourcing.
mm,
Um, we are very aware that there are problems with the solar supply chain around human rights issues, particularly in Xinjiang in China. And it's actually pretty hard to buy new panels that are kind of definitely not implicated in that supply chain. And we do a lot of work to make sure that we do that. Um, and that's one reason why we've elected to use second life panels. So in a way, it's a different approach to ethical sourcing. But for the new panels we're using on site, we obtain those from Meyer Burger. They are pretty much the best in terms of ethical sourcing. And we've bought those. Those are in a warehouse close to the site, ready to go on. So that's how that all kind of ties together.
that's really useful, John. You've obviously thought deeply about the process of construction and also deeply about the kind of the ethical values around this project. So it's encouraging to know that you've used Second Life panels, but you've also gone to Meyer Burger, who I agree are they're European headquartered as well, which is valuable, and they are premium product without as much of that painted ethical supply chain that we have from panels directly made in China. So that's really useful. Thank you, John. So just a couple more questions from me, and I guess we can open the floor to questions after this. But looking towards the future, John and Rich, what are your other plans for Big Solar Co-op? How do you see yourself moving in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question we're asked a lot at the moment is, you do solar farms now. Are you going to do a lot more of them? I, Rich, I think the answer is we'd think about it, wouldn't we, at the
Yes,
moment?
yeah. Well, and I mean, it's also interesting to see what to see if other groups find this sort of same sort of niche that we found as well. I mean, the tricky thing is the grid, of course, as we all know. So it's not just a case of finding another nice field that is perhaps not excellent farmland and sticking a project in it. Obviously, as with all solar farms these days, it's the grid availability that's the challenge.
I mean, there's also issues around what size is viable. You know,
Mm.
that a lot of people would like, I think, to put in some ground mount systems that are smaller even than what we're doing. Well, you know, a few years ago, this would have been considered a large solar farm. You know,
Mm,
but you get into viability issues because of the costs of planning and things like that. So it's really it's there are a lot of variables to make this viable. But I think for the wider Big Solar Co-op, I mean, I think our focus, our everyday focus remains on rooftop solar. There's an awful lot more to build out there, and that's community buildings and commercial. So we're continuing to build out the sites for Mid-Counties Cooperative, so they're supermarket sites. We've got a visitor centre that we're building very soon. We've got some schools. We've got some um, sheltered housing where we're putting solar. We've got a heritage railway, a golf club. You know, there's a really interesting range of different places that have big roofs and use a lot of energy where we can really make a difference and make something viable. And that remains our focus. But if we come across new opportunities to do larger scale projects, yeah, we certainly will look at them.
Thanks, John. That's great. Thanks, Rich. So I guess it's really a prime opportunity for investors to invest in a solar farm with Big Solar Co-op. It seems these opportunities don't come along too often, so it's great that we have this opportunity, and it's a prime opportunity as well at the moment. So thank you for that. My penultimate question to you both, I guess, is there anything left unsaid that you would like to mention to our investors on this call and those who might be watching it later?
One thing that I think it's interesting for people to know about Big Solar Co-op is that Big Solar Co-op is slightly differently structured to some other renewable energy or community energy organizations. The bones of it are very similar, but we have also membership. So we have investor members, so people who buy shares. We also have volunteer members, and actually, the ultimately the direction of the organization is held by those volunteer members. And some of those volunteers are involved in some financial work we do, or in governance through the board. Some are involved in solar design, and many of those volunteers, are volunteers who in their day job are solar designers, right? Um, and we've also had people who have come to us, been trained up by us to do solar design, and have gone and got jobs in industry. So we attract younger people as volunteers as well. We're very keen on finding new potential solar sites. So if people have ideas, and when I speak to people sort of that I meet on the train, people say, "Oh yeah, there's a place near me and it's really big and they should have solar." And I don't understand why we don't have solar. And what I want to be able to say to them, and I do say to them, is, well, join us and we'll give you the tools to go and approach them. Let's get it built. And actually, some of those conversations have turned into sites that we've built. So, if you do have a site in your community in mind, then bring it to us. We'll have a look at it, and maybe we can get it built together.
There's a few questions out there that touch tangentially on stuff that's just been discussed. So Martin is asking that many enterprises have struggled to convince themselves of financial viability of projects post FIT, so feed-in tariffs. What is Big Solar's secret? Is it scale? You mentioned the volunteering aspect. Are there any other differentiating features that enable you to do this successfully?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And actually, what happens when we go to speak to, most people who've got a big roof and a big bill have considered solar in the past, and they've not done it for a variety of reasons. But it really boiled down to not very many reasons. One is it's a bit more complicated than it looks up front. And so, it's a sort of a 1A reason or 1B reason there is they didn't find anybody they could trust to work with. And so that's, somewhere we're able to help, I think, because of our not-for-profit structure. We probably do get into those conversations. But the other one is investment. And actually, the return on investment for solar on a rooftop with the right sort of attributes, hazard a guess, it's sort of 8 or 9 year payback maybe, which for a lot of internal investment from businesses isn't good enough. And we've heard so many times people saying, I took it to the board and they laughed at me. They said, if it doesn't get a 3 year payback, there's no way. We even had people say, my board told me if I couldn't get an 18-month payback, I could forget it. So, and we've heard that a lot. So because of the way we're funded through community shares and bonds, and we have some relatively small loans as well. These aren't high interest; they're patient capital in a sense. And so we're able to deliver that slower return, and that is our business model. And it's not a business model for people wanting to self-invest. So that's kind of why it works for us. Do we get installs cheaper? No. We get better quality installs for the same price. So because of the Meyer Burger panels or the REC panels and the Fronius inverters, we use it for absolutely tip-top kit that you can buy. It's expensive. We use good installers who aren't like incredibly cheap, but then we do have economies of scale. So yeah, we get a better quality for the same price. But the secret really is that we're not looking to make a quick return. We're in it for the long term, and that's what makes it doable for us, and maybe not so much for others.
That's a really, really good answer, which I think spreads beyond your organization, because many of our investors at Ethex they don't demand that 18-month payback that you just mentioned, which is purely commercial. They have a genuine interest in the impact, which you've clarified very well in your offer document, the impact and a reasonable financial return. So that I think is an important answer. So there's one financial question and a couple of technical questions, if I could brand them such. The financial question is, has the business plan financial projections, have they been updated to reflect the additional fundraise? I believe yes. And
Yeah.
future projects that will utilize the bonds. So it's a bit of a yes, bit of a no, but what's your answer?
So future projects that will utilize
The
these
bonds.
Well, I mean, all the money we're raising here is going into the Whiteborough project.
Yeah.
Having been quite successful at raising money through a bond issue, we might come back to do future ones for future projects. I mean, it seems quite likely that we will think about doing that. That's been successful. And, it's nice to be able to raise large amounts of money for these projects from members of the public to broaden kind of a sense of ownership and to broaden the kind of benefits rather than to lump that all in with a bank. It also builds a situation where if we do go and take bank loans in the future, we're in a much stronger position. So if we want to borrow money to do huge projects, we could do so from a position where we don't have vast amounts of secured debt already. So that's there. But yes, yeah, so all these funds, as soon as they're being raised, are going into building this project.
Yeah. And on this project, I mean, yeah, we live in a country where there's a vast history, a vast legacy of mining, most of which has closed down, not a lot of which has been open cast. But to what extent are there more Whiteboroughs out there for you over the next 5 years?
That's interesting. I mean, Rich, when we looked at the site history, the history I think is that of a lot of small mines back in the days when mines were very sort of manual. And then towards the end of a project, as a mine, they just came and open casted the hell out of it, which obviously in some geologies you couldn't do. But there's quite a lot more similar sort of places in the area, aren't there, Rich?
Yeah, the whole area is was covered in these, and they look like they look like they started off as quite sort of relatively independent kind of ventures that people would have made. It would be quite a sort of a people would be prospecting, and it would be it's that sort of era where people were probably selling shares, and a new venture. I'm going to open a field over here, and let's give it a go. And probably a lot of them failed quite soon and didn't yield the coal they wanted to. But yeah, so there is as a result anyway, an area which is covered with at least on the coal risk map, you can see that there was a lot of small dotted around pits of all kinds, open cast and some deeper ones. And there was a very large one, and there's a lot of mining heritage in the area as well. There's a visitor center, a mining visitor center just up the road from where we are, from some of the more successful pits that have been there. So yeah, there's a lot of sites like this to a greater or lesser extent have been affected by open cast mining, and the soil and the quality of the ground have been impacted, even half a century on. Yeah, but whether or not they have the kind of the grid access and what it takes to get a solar farm on them is another question.
Well, one of the interesting things that's been developing that some people probably might on this call might be aware of is that there's a kind of change in the approach in the grid codes and very slow and rather frustratingly slow change, but which looks like it might yield the possibility of us being able to sell energy locally. From this site and from similar sites in the future. I mean, there are some sort of some projects out there in the UK that already do that, but relatively few of them, and it's hard to do. Changes in the grid code, P441, for example, ought to enable that to be possible more widely. And that would be very interesting because I think if you look at a place like Whiteborough, it's an old ex-mining area. And therefore, almost by direct correlation, it's also a somewhat deprived area where there are more people in fuel poverty. At the moment, we can't really do this, but we're looking at as fast as possible get into a situation where we could sell the energy locally at a lower rate. Now, if you could tie those two things together reliably in a way that you knew was going to be able to be implemented for, years or decades on end, then it might make more of these kind of schemes viable. And they're clustered in the parts of the country where, guess what? There isn't so much money, there isn't so much social capital, and therefore community energy projects haven't really, by and large, proliferated. So, that's exactly where the big solar co-op model works pretty well. So definitely something we're keeping an eye on.
That's really interesting. So one very quick technical question. What brand of inverters are you using? And then a couple of questions from Peter Robinson, but I'll follow up for that.
These are SMA inverters. We kind of don't have a choice actually because of the way that when you're using older, some of our panels are older, the second life panels, they run at a different voltage from panels you might buy today. There are comparatively few inverters that can handle that. And the other aspect is oversizing, right? So one of the reasons this site is great for what we're doing is that it's got a relatively small grid connection. It's a 2 megawatt maximum export grid connection, but a relatively large field, which means that crowding the field full of inexpensive second life solar panels so we can get as much down that grid connection as possible makes a lot of sense. And that means that you're building more DC capacity, solar panel side, than you have AC export capacity. Some inverters are better at handling that kind of setup than others. And in fact, really for what we're doing, there's only one inverter on the market that really does the biz, and that's an SMA inverter. Luckily, because had it been a Chinese-made inverter, we'd be plunged back into our ethical dilemmas again.
Okay. And then just broadly, are typical warehouse buildings able to support the weight of solar panels without reinforcement? And then I guess more generally, can you summarize the pitch that you make to companies with large roofs?
So warehouses are really frustrating, aren't they? Because it's huge spaces, um, very often not possible to make them financially viable because their on-site energy usage is low, and the kind of financial viability of rooftop solar generally hinges on being able to sell the energy on site. That's the main problem with warehouses. There is also this issue of strength, and we've come across, you know, NHS distribution centres with huge roofs, quite a lot of energy use on site, refrigeration, but where the roof just isn't strong enough to take conventional solar panels. There are some solutions to lightweight solar, but they're not that well developed or available in the UK. They tend to be expensive for what they are. So that warehouses is still not an easy one to crack, I think it's fair to say. Um, and then the subsequent follow-on question, which was very good and I've forgotten,
How
remind
do
me.
you summarize the pitch you make to companies with large roofs?
Yeah, so the pitch basically is we go in and say, have you considered solar? That's often where we start because they generally have. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about your energy use? If they can tell us, just give us the basics for their energy use, we can look at their roof from, satellite data, and we can do a design for them. So we basically turn up with a design, and if we have energy data, a proposal which says this is how much we would charge you for your electricity. This is how much we think we can save you. So we essentially move pretty quickly to a pitch which focuses on savings. I mean, a lot of organizations might have various green policies, but essentially it's sold on price, on savings.
I think we've run out of questions, Ben.
Great. Well, thank you, John and Richard. We're coming up to about 40 minutes of this webinar. So thank you for your time. All is left is for me to say The raise is open until the 26th of September. As we mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, we're currently sitting on just over 1.6 million raised. The target is 1.8, so we are nearly there. If you have any questions after this webinar, or if you're watching this as a recorded webinar, please send us your questions over email. We can make sure to provide you with our email addresses after this recording is over. Richard, do you have anything more to say before we close this webinar?
Just want to say, keep an eye on our website and on LinkedIn and join our mailing list. Maybe if you want some updates on Whiteborough, there's going to be a lot of developments over the next few weeks. So yes, if you want to keep up with them, then keep an eye on us.
And I'd say very often people are somewhat hesitant to ask for detailed questions, but please don't be. I mean, I do get emails from people that are very specific with very detailed questions, and I'm always really, really pleased, I or other member of the team, to answer those in detail, whether they relate to the investment or to what we're doing at Whiteborough, or indeed to wider questions around the industry. If people are interested in the solar industry, there's Solar and Storage, which is one of the best known conferences coming up in a couple of weeks' time in Birmingham. I'm on a panel, a community energy panel there, and people who are interested in that might want to come and either would probably want to see me again, but soak up the vibes, and if you want to ask questions in person, that's a great place to catch me.
Great. Thank you, John. That's great. All right, everyone. Well, goodbye from me, Jerome, John, and Richard. And as I said, if you have any questions, please do send them to us, and John, Richard, Jerome, and I would be more than happy to assist you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Bye.